In this last set of notes, we will talk about elections and the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. So in terms of talking about elections, this is where the UK is vastly different from something like a US system. So in the House of Commons, there are 650 members, which means there are 650 electoral districts. It's a single member district plurality system, or a first past the post system. So again, similar to how elections for the United States Congress work. There's one member of parliament per district, which means there's about one person per every 70,000 people. But a huge difference is that you don't have to live in the district that you are running for election from, right? So if I wanted to be a representative from our district in the state of Kansas, right, I would have to live where I do in Lawrence, that I can't run to be the member of Congress that represents Wichita or the member of Congress that represents Garden City, that they don't have to live in their district where we do in our system. So this means to guarantee that yes, good girl. Thank you. This means to guarantee that the party leaders can stay party leaders, they run in safe districts. So this means that, the conservative leaders or the labor leaders will run in the districts that are always, always, always going to... Hey, yeah, can you say hi to everybody?
Hi.
They're always going to run in...
Hear us.
They can hear you, yeah.
They can't hear us.
They can hear you.
Hi.
I'll show you at the end, okay?
Can't
No. Hey, go play for a second. I'm almost done.
No.
Okay. But they'll run in places that will always vote for that party.
Okay, fine.
The most votes win. And they, in theory, serve fixed 5-year terms. But what this means is that at least every 5 years, the UK has to hold elections. And there are a couple of different provisions that can be used to have elections happen sooner than that. So, right, we talked about the 2015 election where David Cameron was reelected. The Conservatives win a outright majority, do not have to form a coalition government. And then in 2017, he steps down. Theresa May becomes the prime minister. Theresa May calls for a new round of elections, thinking that there will be more conservative members of parliament, and she loses some. So this means that the next general election has to happen by June of 2022, because that's how the system works. So instead of every 2 years or every 4 years there being guaranteed elections in the United States, right, there has to be a parliamentary election at least once every 5 years. And every time an election happens, it resets the clock. In terms of looking at a comparison between the UK and the United States, in terms of our elections, the differences are quite notable. In the United States, parties are less powerful. Right now, people will argue that parties are more powerful because Republicans and Democrats, or the existence of those two parties, make it difficult for minor political parties to exist. But in the UK, the political parties get to dictate who runs where. So if I am running for election and I'm a member of the Labour Party and they hate me, they're going to have me run up against like the Conservative Party leader to knock me out of the House of Commons. So they get to determine who runs where. The United States, where members must live in districts. In Great Britain, that's not the case. They don't usually live there. In the United States, party leaders run in their respective districts, so they live where they are representing from. But in the UK, they run in safe districts where, the Conservative Party will never lose in X districts, so that's where they will always run their leaders. In the United States, you get to vote for, 4 officials on the national level. You're member of the House of Representatives, both of your senators and the president, but in Great Britain, you only get to vote for one. You get to vote for the MP who is standing for election to represent your district or your constituency. In the UK, we see about 65% of the public turnout to vote in the average election. In the United States, it's anywhere from 30 to 60%. In terms of what the actual elections look like, elections in the US are first past the post, single member districts where almost no minor parties get representation. But in the UK, elections are first past the post, single member districts, so the same there. There are minor parties that get some representation. So like there is the Welsh political party Plaid Cymru. There is the Scottish National Party, right? That those two parties will get seats in the House of Commons because they are representative of those two nations. But there are also Labour and Conservative members who will, win from the constituencies in Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland as well. If the United Kingdom used a system of proportional representation, then minor parties would have far, far more representation than they do now. And you can kind of remember the Queen, Lion, CGP Grey videos to kind of talk you through the math on why that happened. But we had good discussions about that stuff. So I don't know if we need to rehash it now. The UK has a Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court has some challenges that we'll talk about in a second. Their Supreme Court was established in 2009, and it has 12 justices. Instead of being a constitutional court like the Supreme Court of the United States or the other countries that we have talked about are, those are called constitutional courts because their job is to determine whether or not a law passed by Congress or a law passed by one of the states is legal under the Constitution. These are just final courts of appeal asking questions on whether or not the law or legal procedures were applied correctly. The only impact it has in terms of constitutional questions at times will be issues of devolution, where in some of the cases it hears, it will ask questions as to whether or not devolved governments worked within their powers or if they overstepped their boundaries. And then the big question will be, what kinds of EU things is the United Kingdom expected to adhere to in a post-Brexit world? But their job used to be to make sure that everything being passed by Parliament was in accordance to the obligations they were expected to be tied to through the European Union. They don't have judicial review power. So they can't overturn acts of Parliament. They can't overturn laws that they just can't overturn any primary legislation. And part of that is because there's not a firm written constitution for them to be able to highlight precedent to be able to do that. They just don't have that authority, which makes the UK court system kind of odd. When people talk about the government writ large, they will refer to Westminster. This is the district that includes where Parliament, Whitehall, and the Parliament all are. And then here's kind of where we'll end this set of notes on looking at policymaking and elections and things in the UK, right? So the general public has the ability to influence their local or regional government at any instant, right? So they can vote for their local assembly, their local government, that kind of stuff. But the only other impact that they have nationally is voting for the House of Commons, right? They get to vote for that singular MP, and then from that comes literally everything else in the government, right? So your MP doesn't really get to determine whether or not who the prime minister is unless you are voting for the majority party. But if you vote for the minority party, right, you don't get any say in who the prime minister is or the structure of the shadow cabinet. Once the House of Commons is seated, the prime minister works to determine who the cabinet is, and then they determine who else gets high-ranking positions in the civil service or the bureaucracy. So structurally, their democracy functions a lot differently than a traditional presidential system where you can vote for multiple levels of government and multiple branches of government. So this is the end of the second set. When I get rid of little Miss Ainsley and get her a snack.
Baby in the back.
Yeah, they see your baby in the bag. Then I'll come back and talk about citizen society in the state, and that will be it for me in terms of lecture notes on the United Kingdom.
Hey.
So do you need to say bye, Ainsley?
Bye.
You have anything you want anybody to know?
I can't see them outside.
Yeah, you can't see anybody else because we're just recording.
Bye, kids.
Say have a nice day.
Have a nice day.